Welcome to Proactive Physio Podcast, Season 2, Episode 5. I am your host, Jaimin Bhatt. I am the editorial board member of Italian Journal of Sports Rehabilitation and Posturology. So, in today's podcast, I am going to tell you about the importance of breathing and why breathing integrates during the movement. This podcast is about enhance your clinical skills and knowledge. It's great to have you listening today. So let's start with today's podcast. We can go for up to several days without water and 30 days without any food, but only a few minutes without air, which is impossible. It is not at all exaggerated to say that breathing is crucial at the most fundamental level. What does that, however, have to do with motion? Breathing has been emphasized as a crucial element of health and performance for centuries in disciplines like martial arts, pranayama, and others. In the modern era, we have transitioned from ignoring the breath to endowing it with nearly mystical qualities. Let's attempt to clear away some muddle and gain some perspective. There are three breathing related areas can be seen: a biomechanical, a biochemical, and psychophysiological. Let's first define breathing and respiration. While respiration has two components, a physiological respiration and cellular respiration, breathing is a physical act of moving air in and out of the lungs. We will discuss the mechanical action of breathing while examining the biomechanical and physiological action of gas exchange for our purpose. You will discover that these terms are occasionally interchanged and even used in the definition of the other if you run a quick Google search. So the most basic and yet complicated thing we do is breathe. If we choose to make it conscious, it is. But the moment we stop paying attention to it, it resumes on its own. How things function when they continue on their own is one of our main concerns. Did we reset it anyway when we perform the breathing exercise? Yes, consider how trendy it is right now to work certain muscles like the glutes. Almost anyone with the basic understanding of hip extension and isolation exercise can claim to have a stimulate the glutes. But are your glutes performing any better when you stand up to leave the session? Do our actions affect other things? We do only because we run the circuit and generate activity in a brief, unique circumstances. That's how I define function. It is useful if you do this one thing and it applies to many other things. It is referred to as particular training, a specific activity training, a specific sports training, or the specificity of the task. If you focus on improving at only one thing, it is very helpful to you. This only applies to breathing pattern, just like it would with any other workout. When performing an exercise, we must consider whether the activity will solely benefit the specific act we are performing or if it will also benefit other actions. As a healthcare provider, it is my duty to put health above performance or fitness when talking about breathing efficiency, and breath training. The first factor that is frequently disregarded is whether there is a structural issue. Is there a blockage in the airway? Is the septum deviated? Is the airway closed or anatomically small? Consider this for a moment. What if the position where the anatomical airway is biggest is when a person has poor posture with an anterior head, rounded shoulder? What is the incentive to maintain that posture when your airway is 30 or over 50% affected? When you stand perfectly straight in a military stance, prior to providing a postural cues, the initial step is to determine whether there is an obstruction. That is a health issue and the person should likely get it examined. The anatomical airway issues are first eliminated. A brief background will help you if you are dealing with a client and this has raised a lot of issue, or if you are a rehabilitation specialist and breathing is not your area of expertise. I just simply ask you, do you suffer from a seasonal allergy? Are you backed up? Do you sneeze? Have you ever experienced bronchitis? When you breathe, do you wheeze? Do you frequently experience a dry mouth, which is another symptoms of mouth breathing? These are the issues that might compel us to conduct additional research before prescribing a breathing exercise. Secondly, a lot of us try to engage our muscles. Although I can make your glutes work, you won't be able to use them efficiently for gait or other activities if you are unable to fully extend your hips. And this is the very good example. If you don't get a proper hip extension, your glute muscles will not activate properly. It is not a problem to construct your bridge and your glutes will fire. Let me say that again. To avoid a sort of banging the joint against its end, you fire your hip flexors a little to keep from reaching the end range of extension. When you stand up and reach that point where your joint capsule becomes tight. Due to a lack of hip range of motion, you will frequently block your glutes in a movement. Not because the glutes can't be short, but rather because firing a glute close to its end range of motion, which could result in microtrauma and joint injury. So activate your glutes all you want when lying on the ground, but did it remain active once you stood up? Yes. This also applies to breathing exercise as well. In order to activate the circuits that allow your intercostals, diaphragm, abdominals, and other breathing contributors to function, we can have you lie on your back and practice a crocodile breathing, a seesaw breathing, or a motor control activity. However, what if there is a mobility issue? The neck, shoulder girdle, and rib cage should probably all be able to move freely. But since the diaphragm and pelvic floor also operate together, it is also beneficial to have a mobility in the pelvis as well as in a hip joint. If you want to try to train or coach breathing, you must first determine whether there are any serious movement limitation present or not. First, remove the potential cause of inhibitor of a movement. The active straight leg raise and shoulder mobility are the first two movements that I examine in my movement screen to see how they affect breathing pattern. Looking at the shoulders range of motion is only one aspect of shoulder mobility. It reveals whether your upper spine is actively extended. It reveals whether there are any ribcage constraints. The active straight leg raise operates in a similar manner. We can learn a lot about the pelvis, core, and how the hip works together, from symmetry and the capacity to lift a leg while unweighted. The natural breathing rhythm we genuinely employ can be interrupted and restricted by restriction from the neck through the pelvis. If there is a restriction, you must choose a different route and adopt an ineffective breathing pattern. So when you have a restriction in your joint or in patient's joint, one must look out to remove the dysfunction. A mobility comes before a motor control or a stability, as is often asserted. Mobility must come first as a matter of course. We can continue if mobility is evident. It doesn't have to be flawless. But if you are doing a breathing exercise to sink the diaphragm or not use the upper chest as much, you are missing the fundamental point of why the breathing is awful in the first place, due to a severe constraints in the neck, thoracic, spine, pelvis, hip and shoulder joint. So first, eliminate the major mobility limitation. I have helped a lot of recreational players by enhancing active straight leg raise and shoulder mobility, not because I enhanced a cellular oxygen delivery, but rather because we improve the breathing mechanics. The breathing muscles can get tired, especially if you are employing the incorrect ones. Your next run may not be constrained most by your calf or quad's endurance. It could be the inefficient and incorrect use of the respiratory muscles endurance due to poor trunk and upper body motion pattern. Now assume that mobility is not the issue. You can either use the crocodile breathing or seesaw breathing technique, or you can use the Feldenkrans technique also. If we observe the diaphragm rising, the chest descending and then reversing, a seesaw breathing is likely an issue. This suggests that a baby may have an impediment in their airway or another issue. We prefer it when everything moves in a unison. Naturally, we want a belly breathing, but we also want a minimal chest contribution also. A problem might be indicated if we observe one substantially more frequent than the other. However, in our fast-paced, sedentary society, with its high stress levels and emotional problems, we might need to reset a breathing pattern. You can live a fast-paced, stressful, and entirely sedentary lifestyle. Consider swerving in and out of traffic. It doesn't really do anything, but the emotional environment is high. So the brain needs to be reminded of its alternative. If mobility issues are not the cause of breathing being out of rhythm, breathing may be out of a synchronization, since it has been a while since breathing has been used in a natural state. Similar to how martial arts and yoga use their breath, practice is similar to the meditation. If you stop to examine breathing pattern, some of the earliest type of exercise begin with the breathing, but some of the most recent workouts fads don't even take breathing pattern into consideration. Today's instructors frequently believe that if they can exhaust you, everything will work out for the best. I am not sure if that's the great strategy for dealing with this. However, consider that the ancient wisdom instructs us to begin any exercise or activity with focus and efficiency in the breathing pattern because it powers all of our other movements. We want to tone those glutes, rip those abs, and bulk up those pecs. That is the things that we must consider it. And just breathe however you choose. We will discover that seesaw breathing is a technique to de-emphasize the chest breathing and improve the abdominal breathing as I search for ways to re-coordinate or reconnect breathing. A crocodile breathing is another technique for doing that. It provides a different type of feedback in which the belly expands both laterally and vertically, lifting the lower back and eliminating the sway that results from lying on one's stomach. The way the back moves up and down resembles a crocodile breathing as it is resting on its belly. So now to remind the brain that there are breathing possibilities other than upper chest breathing, we have some incredible strategies to reset or reconnect a true breathing pattern. The low back, the chest, the ribs, the abdominals, a lot of tightness in the pelvic floor area, and unquestionably, the neck comes to mind as the restricted place to start with. Look at all the folks swinging kettlebells who still believe that, or they are doing the exercise in a gym with a high intensity. They said that, or they believe that the core is in the neck. They are not breathing properly and have completely contracted and anterior neck muscles, which leads to further issue, and we experience the issue if the breath escape. Add another step to it. If a person you are working with has a history of breathing issue, an anatomical obstruction might exist, and airway may be compromised, although there are tons of options available. But I wouldn't start with the fitness. When we discuss a breath, we must be careful. We must check for any anatomical obstruction. We must guarantee that The body's respiratory area are mobile. Keep in mind the area of chest that the lungs occupy. Any restriction in that region has the potential to observe a normal breathing because the lungs cover the region from practically beneath the traps all the way down to below the ribs. Some of these breathing coordination exercises are extremely fantastic to resetting a breathing pattern. If the constraints are removed and there are no impediments, since there are actually remedical exercise once you have reset, incorporate the new breathing into your daily routine. A corrective exercise should only be used as a temporary fix until you can integrate your new knowledge into your daily routine. The next time you run, your breathing will be better. You will be able to breathe easier on your next running. As with all other bodily movements, breathing is governed by the same principle. On the other hand, movement can make breathing easier. Your right side will feel like it is filling with the air if you once more sit in your chair, lean to the left and breathe. You will notice your breath is going in that direction if you slouch over. You will now notice your anterior chest expanding as you inhale if you sit up straight in the chair with your chest protruding. In essence, breathing can be affected by movements or a position. Consider a person with a reduced thoracic kyphosis who has a flat thoracic spine. Think about the sympathetic nervous system also, which is known as our fight or flight system, which is a branch of autonomic nervous system that is located in the thoracic spine. The sympathetic nervous system is pushed towards the on stage when a person is constantly extending their thorax. Encouragement of a more flexed thoracic position can lessen this ongoing stimulus to the sympathetic nervous system and lessen stress and anxiety. So for more information on the connection between the thoracic spine and autonomic nervous system, you can read a research paper from PubMed and Cochrane. Additionally, it can help people break and stuck pattern of shallow, apical breathing, etc. People are forced to breathe into the posterior thorax when they are placed in a slouch position. Deep breathing will encourage some parasympathetic activation and help in thoracic complex mobilization. There are certain exercises, a child pose, which is one of the first pose that has been taught in yoga class. That is a very good exercise that you can implement. Even though it is a position of rest, many people might not feel rested in that pose. A child pose may prove to be a very difficult position for your athlete as well as general population because it requires a significant ankle, knee, hip and spine mobility. When the knee or hips needs extra support, you can use a folded blanket or a towel. As they become more mobile, move towards the full expression of the pose. People may become anxious as a result of their inability to breathe in this position because you have taken away their compensatory movement pattern, as you will observe. So in this case, have the person adopt a sideline position while hugging their knees. This will lessen their sense of claustrophobia while still providing some of benefits of postural directed breathing for increasing the thoracic flexion. So in comparison to the full pose, doing the child pose while lying on your side may be easier on your joints. It is also a more comfortable position in breathing. It is easier on the ankle, knee, hips and spine. People who lack of proper thoracic spine mobility as well as the rib mobility may find it difficult to breathe while in a child pose position. This might have the opposite effect of what you intended by causing the anxiety. The sideline during the pose improves the rib and thoracic spine mobility and provides a more breathing room. It is also a nice regression to the full pose. This is just one illustration of how different posture and movements can encourage and support the deep breathing. So, in summary, breathing can be significantly impacted by the movement or a position. I hope this will help you in your clinical practice and you will incorporate a breathing pattern while performing the exercise. Thank you for listening this podcast. Don't forget to share and subscribe. See you